India's largest FMCG company, largest private investment bank and largest automaker are all foreign owned. Which other country in the world would let that happen? That clearly tells you why the world is betting on India, Shweta.
Absolutely. And since we are on why the world is betting on India and India's growth trajectory, when we talk about GDP, and since we're talking about that GDP formula, an important aspect of that is also consumption. Now, high frequency indicators, including your real estate sales to automobile sales, will tell you that India is consuming at a rate like never before. However, majority of this consumption is driven by urban consumption as opposed to rural consumption, which is again a point of concern, Shri. At this point, do you see consumption story also kicking in rural India, and do you think that is a challenge the government will have to mitigate going forward?
It's definitely a challenge, Shweta, because we talked about unemployment earlier. Well, it's a reality that we have not been able to create as many jobs as we could have given the economic growth that we're experiencing, but that may be also a reflection of the nature of economy itself. I think if we say that 66% of our employment is still dependent on agriculture, I think that's and look at the contribution of agriculture to GDP.
Absolutely, 20%.
Yeah. So I think
and 60% of India lives in the villages.
Correct. So we need that shift to happen. We need to reduce the dependence on agriculture. We need to move these people into other maybe services sector or manufacturing. So that's a long haul process that needs to happen. So when that happens, obviously we'll see that the demand from rural side also goes up. But I think these are all challenges that we need to deal with as an economy. It's not something that's going to go away overnight. These are all structural issues that we need to address. And I think those will be addressed. But there's no magic wand that either Prime Minister Modi or Nirmala Sitharaman or anyone has that they can wave and these things just disappear.
And just before we went into break, we were also discussing India's resilience when it comes to some of the global shock waves. And we've seen India's export-import story, Rakesh, somehow emerging as again, a beacon of light there, because exports have been on the rise while imports have been subdued to a little bit. The Red Sea crisis has also played its part there, but overall India's export story continues to look brighter. But India now needs to focus, as many would say, on exports of services as opposed to exports of goods, which is where we're not doing too well at the moment. But I think that is again an area of concern, an area of interest where India has stood out in the past couple of years.
Absolutely. My own view is that post-liberalization in 1991, we haven't truly reimagined our export basket. It's very traditional, it's very, inward-looking. It is not aligned yet with the larger changes in the global market, which obviously are always in a very imponderable kind of a situation because global markets have their own challenges. Another war or another strike somewhere changes the dynamics. But we have to reimagine our export basket. And the numbers are looking good in a relative term. We really have to scale up. And both, it's not either or. Goods and services both have to really kick in. And Sandeep is a defense expert. He knows that we have started bringing in some new elements or new buckets. So defense exports, we are one of the largest importers in the defense area, but we have started on a modest scale and we have started exporting defense. We created a new example, for instance, looking at actually stealing an opportunity in the Ukraine war situation by creating a new relationship with Russia, an economic reset I would call it, and it's an economic reset for the global order as well, because we reimagined the oil deal, and that in turn has created a new equilibrium, and India has become closer to Russia. We had some challenges there, and what we're doing is that with that import, which is cost efficient to India, we have also started refining that and exporting that. So US is upset with that, many others are upset. So we are slowly seeing opportunities in putting in some innovation in export basket. We'll have to do much more of that. For instance, our entire agri-export bucket is truly, in an extremely, ad hoc kind of a state. We have, inflation is a political problem. If we have pulses, prices rising or onion prices rising, we stop exports, we bring in more imports. We don't look at economics that time, we look at politics. So if we continue to look at exports of agri-processed foods in that manner, then we have a problem. We need to be consistent with our agri-export policy. That's one area we have huge potential, but then we'll have to divorce that from the political challenge of, BJP lost the election in Delhi purely on onion prices. So, we have to move beyond and, move on and not truly, worry about losing an election here and there.
And there's very little that the government can anyway do by the way of changes in monetary policy. It can only alter with the fiscal, and it is doing so. It's done so by procuring tur dal, by procuring vegetables. At the peak of, improbable climatic conditions last year when tomato prices were at an all-time high.
Yes.
We could buy them from mandis at a much discounted
This
rate.
is one reform that hasn't happened despite the decadal movement that
Right.
Srini was referring to. And I really look forward to this reform.
Right. And since we are, Sandeep, on farm and agriculture, I
Yes.
think we must address the elephant in the room,
Right.
and that is with the ongoing farms protest. Now, you have, Rakesh, on record been consistently against freebies. You've been against dole-outs, which mean nothing when there is no return coming our way as a country. With respect to what farmers are demanding, it's going to be an economic issue as much as a political issue. Where do we stand at the moment? Can we give in to what farmers are demanding, which is a legal guarantee on MSP? The hurt that it will cause to the Indian economy and to India's fiscal math, will we be able to reach that fiscal deficit path if we were to give way to a legal guarantee on MSP for 23 crops on the basis of Swaminathan's formula?
Shweta, I think we need to educate ourselves and educate our viewers. First and foremost, farmer is not one homogeneous entity.
Yes.
And this farmer is essentially from Punjab and parts of Haryana and then parts of UP. In that sense, this is a very small section of the farmers who are represented. And the entire farm output in India, only 28% is this category, wheat and paddy. Rest 72% is growing at about 10 to 12%, milk, poultry. All of them are fighting in a big way, fisheries. So we don't even talk about that. If we start asking for MSP, there is endless number of commodities in India who will start asking for it. And there are two different tracks. This track, the 78% or 72% is firing on its own because it's market aligned. I mean, you go every day, Mother Dairy or Amul raises the prices of the and we consume it because it is
essential.
There is a market at play. The more and more we delay ourselves from bringing in the market mechanics in our farm structure, the farm economy is going to lag, even if some farmers get rich.
So there's a moral hazard to the whole argument which at least some of these farmers are putting forward, which is they're not looking at livelihood protection but livelihood guarantee.
Yes.
Right? I don't think there's any profession anywhere in the world which is like guaranteed. Right? Then the most important thing is you cannot distort the economics of a market. Right? If you create perverse incentives, which is what they're asking for in some sense, you're distorting the market completely. The fundamentals of supply demand, the fair, transparent way in which every market needs to work, that goes for a complete toss.
Absolutely.
And then incentivizing people to produce a certain item which again will eventually crash because there's an overproduction of that, because we've seen this happen ad nauseum in the history of agriculture. That government incentivizes and there's an overproduction and the price crashes, so a government ends up picking up the tab and that's a loss to the public exchequer in some sense.
And a law to guarantee MSP, that would kill the agricultural
Absolutely.
sector. I mean, buyers would shy away from the market.
I'm a firm believer in reforms, which are led by market. So, this word guarantee came in the UPA era.
Yes.
This, Mahatma Gandhi National Employment Guarantee Scheme.
Right.
Guarantee is something which is, to my mind, anti-reform.
Yes.
The moment you guarantee something, it kills the inherent spirit of resilient India to stand on its own feet.
Right.
We have had policies across on poverty, but I believe they were pro-poverty, not pro-poor.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting.
Pro-poverty and pro-poor. But the other important thing that we haven't really touched upon, Shweta, is the political stability that this government has kind of brought in. And you had the Prime Minister not so long ago, just a few days back, in fact, saying that he had been invited by all the other heads of government all through the year, which means that the foreign governments knew that he was coming back to power. So that's, I think, one of the most important guarantees of continuation of policies.
Absolutely.
The fact that, you have political stability, 10 years, another 5 years.
And that's very clearly by design. I think the Prime Minister Modi has also spoken on this. He said, I am committed to my policies, and he's got a long-term vision for the country, right? So you will not see any ad hocism in terms of policy making, which is why when people say, okay, there's a huge expectation from the annual budget, but there's no big bang that's happened, because that's a good thing to my mind, because you're not suddenly disrupting what you did last year. You are building on what you did the previous year. So you're building gradually, but you have a certain strategic direction that you're following.
An SIP policy.
Absolutely. And for businesses, that's the biggest source of comfort. Because as a business, I'm making 5, 10, 20, 30-year plans. So if you keep changing your policies or the incentives, then my whole economics, my whole fundamentals of the business goes for a toss. So I think stability is something vitally important, and I'm very happy that this government actually absolutely focused, and it's a pronunciation that's come from the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister themselves, saying that there is going to be stability, we will not keep changing our policy. So that's a huge reassurance for us.
In fact, Mr. Khar, this is exactly what we're going to be talking about in WITT. We can't really wait to hear what our speakers have to say. You must tell us about the thought behind this WITT, the summit that we've planned, the global summit, and the reason for it to be timed now, so close to the elections. It's literally at an inflection point in this government's tenure.
Well, purely from an investor's perspective globally and in India also, when they do this risk management, it's called, the first and the foremost factor is not return on investment, is basic guarantee, if I can borrow that phrase, on the investment that they made. We have had some really bad decisions. Vodafone, retrospective tax, some of the companies earlier, even after the reforms in 91, Cogentrix had to move out because a counter guarantee was promised to them. Then we thought that counter guarantee is too much a pressure on the fiscal balance sheet of the country. So then it was withdrawn. So Cogentrix left India. So in that sense, continuity is very, very important. The good thing here to note is, Sandeep, that post-liberalization 1991, all political parties are committed to the India growth story. The roadmap could be different. For instance, the Congress and the opposition roadmap is what I call entitlement, which is guarantee. This government's role model is empowerment, which is you stand on your own feet. It may take you 10 years to do it, but once you're standing, you can throw a punch around. So that's how India will, so that is the broad context for the summit. The summit that India has reached here, we are not blind to the challenges that we face today. When she and I constructed the edifice for this particular summit, the idea was to showcase all the pluses and build them in with the inherent challenges that we have. There is a learning from the trajectory that we have had so far. He's right in articulating the decadal momentum, resting on those 4 I's, 1D, one more D that you added, and many more. The collective will of 140 crore people to fly. There is a dream every Indian has. There is a resilience every Indian has. That is independent of any political establishment. So this summit actually captures that sentiment, and which is represented by the political and the popular mandate. That is why the summit keynote by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Absolutely, and we're all looking forward to that. Shri, a lot of sessions will be about what India needs to build on and where India is as far as India's macros is concerned. You have the startup panel, you also have a panel on AI, perhaps everything to look out for as far as future possibilities of India's growth story is also concerned. Tell us a little bit more about the thinking that went behind when you were deciding on these panels. What was the thought process like?
Well, so obviously, Shweta, there was a big team that worked on it, starting with our MD, Rakesh, me, other editors, a lot of other colleagues who went and put their heads around to what should it look like, because this is only the second time that we're doing the What India Thinks Today summit, and we wanted it to be bigger, better, bolder, with new innovative themes, with global speakers, give it a large global flavor. So, but there is going to be some fun, let me assure you. On day one, it's going to be all about fun. We have a lot of global celebrities, local celebrities coming, sports people coming. So we'll be looking at how does India become better at leveraging its, let's say, soft power, so to say. And day two is going to be about geopolitics, geoeconomy. You mentioned some of the themes, startups. They'll be on geopolitics, AI, which
India
is the hottest new
power.
thing. Absolutely, that's on day one. And day three is the TV9 Bharatvarsh Satta Sammelan, with an eye on the Lok Sabha 2024 election. So I think we have a really power-packed 3 days. Who's going to be here? The Prime Minister has very kindly consented to deliver the keynote. So we'll have him there as well, giving the vision for Viksit Bharat. So Rakesh, it's going to be.
There is an assembly of top global thought leaders. So what we have done is global minds, betting on India, Indian policy leaders across political spectrums, and domain experts. For instance, AI. We have a panel where there are people who are working on AI and driving their agendas in top companies, from Reliance to Samsung to Microsoft. So, this is the deep dive that we are aiming for when it comes to core economic drivers. And in the geopolitical arena, again borrowing a phrase from the Prime Minister, we have coined one of the sessions, Not an Era of War, where we are looking at how the world is looking at India in terms of, constructing a new narrative, not just for India, a narrative which borders on mutual growth, inclusive growth, not just for India, but for the 8 billion people living on this planet.
All right, that is beautifully summed up. I believe
Absolutely.
it is going to be a power-packed 3 days from
3 days
News9's
action
table
pack. And the
action
3
pack.
B's, Shweta.
And
I'm
the
excited
3
about
Bs,
it.
of
The
course.
3 B's, the bigger, bolder and better. India is poised for the next big leap. That's of course the session of our that's the theme of our session for the Global Summit. So stay tuned as we continue the countdown to our 2-day Global Summit. I'd like to thank Mr. Rakesh Kar, Sridhar Ramakrishnan and Shweta for joining us this evening. Thanks for watching.
Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.